1995, a man robbed two banks in broad daylight. No mask, no disguise. He walked in, showed his face to every camera in the building, and calmly demanded cash. When police caught him hours later and showed him the surveillance footage, he stared at it in complete disbelief. He wasn't shocked that he got caught. He was shocked that the cameras could even see him. He had rubbed lemon juice on his face before the robbery because he believed it would make him invisible, the same way lemon juice can be used as invisible ink. His exact words to police were, "But I wore the juice." That man wasn't insane. He wasn't stupid in the way you're imagining. He was something far more common and far more dangerous. He was completely, unshakably confident. And that confidence is the reason two psychologists at Cornell University spent years studying a pattern that explains why some of the most incompetent people you know are also the most certain they're right. Think about someone in your life right now, maybe a coworker, maybe a relative, someone who talks with total certainty about topics they barely understand. They're not lying to you. They actually believe it. And here's the part that should make you a little uncomfortable. The less someone knows about something, the more confident they usually feel about it. This isn't an insult. It's a documented psychological pattern. And the unsettling part is, it might already be happening to you, right now, in some area of your life you feel completely sure about. So why does this happen? Why does ignorance feel like expertise from the inside? In 1999, David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger ran a study at Cornell that would eventually get their names permanently attached to this effect. They tested people on logical reasoning, grammar, and humor, then asked each person to estimate how well they did compared to everyone else. The results were almost hard to believe. People who scored in the bottom 12%, meaning they performed worse than almost everyone else in the room, estimated that they had outperformed 62% of the group. They weren't just wrong, they were confidently, dramatically wrong. Meanwhile, the people at the top of the scoring, the ones who actually knew what they were talking about, slightly underestimated themselves. The experts doubted their own performance more than the people who failed. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just people being arrogant. Dunning and Kruger discovered something they called the dual burden. The same lack of skill that causes someone to make mistakes also removes their ability to recognize those mistakes. Think about that for a second. If you don't understand grammar, you can't accurately judge your own grammar. If you don't understand your own incompetence in a subject, you have no internal alarm system telling you that you're wrong. The tool you'd need to detect the problem is the exact tool you're missing. Psychologists eventually mapped this pattern into 4 stages, and almost everyone passes through them at some point in life. The first stage is what researchers nicknamed the peak of Mount Stupid. This is where confidence is sky high, but actual skill is close to zero. You learn one fact about a topic, and suddenly you feel like you could teach a class on it. Then reality hits. As you start learning more, you enter the valley of despair, where you realize just how much you don't know, and your confidence crashes. Then comes the slope of enlightenment, where real competence slowly builds alongside a more accurate sense of your own limits. And finally, the plateau of sustainability, where your confidence and your actual skill finally match up. Most people assume they're already at the final stage. Almost no one ever thinks they're standing on Mount Stupid while they're standing on it. Now something surprising happens when scientists look inside the brain during this process. Researchers studying brain activity found 2 distinct signals that show up when someone answers a question. One is called the FN400 wave, and it fires when someone relies on a fast gut feeling of familiarity, a sense that the answer just feels right, without any real memory backing it up. The other is called the LPC wave, and it fires when someone is engaging in actual detailed recollection, pulling from real stored knowledge. People who overestimate their abilities tend to rely heavily on that fast FN400 feeling. It feels like knowing. It is not knowing. It's your brain mistaking familiarity for fact. There's another layer to this that most people never consider. Some critics have pushed back on the original study, arguing that basic statistics could explain some of the results, things like regression toward the average, or the natural human habit of rating ourselves slightly better than we probably are. That criticism is fair, and good science should be questioned, but newer research, including large-scale replications using birth cohort data out of the UK, found that even after correcting for those statistical effects, the core pattern held up. People with the least competence in a subject still, on average, overestimated themselves by the widest margin. The effect survived the scrutiny. This isn't just an academic curiosity. It shows up in life or death environments. Inside U.S. Army Special Forces training, instructors actively watch for this exact blind spot. In a 12-man team operating in a high-pressure environment, one overconfident operator who thinks they've mastered a skill they've barely touched can put the entire team at risk. There's a saying inside that culture, "You're a Green Beret, you'll figure it out." It builds resourcefulness, but it can also quietly feed the same overconfidence Dunning-Kruger were describing decades earlier. So the people training some of the most highly skilled operators in the world spend real time and real money trying to break this exact psychological pattern. What most people don't realize is that this effect doesn't only apply to trivia or grammar or bank robbers with citrus fruit. It applies to relationships. It applies to how good you think you are at reading people, managing money, understanding politics, or even understanding your own personality. Think about the last argument you had where you were completely convinced you were right. Did you actually check your facts, or did it just feel obviously true? That feeling of obvious truth is exactly the sensation researchers are warning us about. It's the FN 400 wave again, dressed up as common sense. The domains where you feel the most certain, with the least amount of double-checking, are often exactly where you should be paying the closest attention. There's a reason this pattern is so hard to notice in the moment. Nobody walks around thinking, "I am currently overconfident and wrong." That's not how the brain works. The feeling of being right and the feeling of being wrong are indistinguishable from the inside. Both feel exactly the same, which is the entire trap. You can't just introspect your way out of it. You need something outside your own head, actual evidence, actual pushback, actual people who know more than you and are willing to say so. This changes everything about how we should think about confidence. We've been taught that confidence is a sign of competence. Speak with certainty, and people will believe you know what you're talking about. But confidence and competence are not the same thing, and sometimes they move in completely opposite directions. The loudest person in the room is not always the most correct person in the room. Sometimes they're just the person furthest from realizing how much they don't know. So how do you actually catch this happening to yourself, since by definition, you can't easily see your own blind spot? Researchers point to a few specific habits. One is called actively open-minded thinking, which just means deliberately searching for information that challenges what you already believe, instead of only consuming things that confirm it. Another is running a pre-mortem, where before you commit to a decision, you imagine that it has already failed completely, and you work backward to figure out why. This forces your brain to slow down and actually search for detailed reasoning instead of relying on that fast, comfortable gut feeling. And maybe the simplest one, find one area of your life where you feel 100% certain and go ask someone more skilled than you for honest feedback. Not comfortable feedback, honest feedback. Because here's the uncomfortable truth this research keeps pointing back to. The most dangerous mindset isn't ignorance. Ignorance can be fixed. The most dangerous mindset is the certainty that comes right after it, before real understanding has had time to catch up. Real expertise doesn't feel like knowing everything. It usually feels a little more uncertain, a little more careful, because the more you actually learn about something, the more clearly you can see everything you still don't know. So before you speak with total certainty about something today, ask yourself one honest question. Are you standing on the slope of enlightenment, or are you still on Mount Stupid, just enjoying the view? If this made you rethink even one thing you were sure about, that's the whole point. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into the psychology hiding behind everyday behavior.